Can a $700 camera setup compare with
a $5,000 professional DSLR? That's what we're going to be doing today, shooting portraits out in the field, comparing the big Canon and Nikon DSLRs to the relatively inexpensive mirrorless camera.
Stick around. So, just like I said in the last video, we were going to come out and be out in the field, freezing, and it's a cold January day here on Long Island. But we're at a small train museum that Eric and I have used for portrait shoots. And we're going to come out here and we're going to talk about portraiture and the different ways that you can use different equipment to take portraits, and also at the end we're going to show you a budget way to get portraits where you don't have to break the bank. Now I'm holding my D750 with the 70 to 200 millimeter lens on it. This is like a $4,000 setup. What do you got?
I've got the Canon 5D Mark IV with an 85 millimeter 1.4 lens. It's a thousands of dollar setup, just like Bill's. So we're going to shoot portraits using this, using Bill's Nikon. I'm going to switch to the M50 using these same lenses and shoot portraits with that. And then at the end, we're going to put a 50 millimeter 1.8 lens on the M50, a really budget setup, and we're going to shoot portraits with that and see what it looks like.
Hopefully at the end, when we start comparing the images, they may not be exactly the quality of the more expensive setups, but it's a good way to get started with portraits. You know, that setup is going to be about $700 for the M50, and then the 50 millimeter 1.8 I picked up the other day to use with the M50, and it was $125 brand new. So it's a great lens to start. It's the Nifty 50, the Canon Nifty 50 that you hear about. It's usually one of the first lenses that any Canon photographer, when they start with the DSLR, will get after their kit lens.
So let's see how the M50 stands up to real world out in the field portrait shooting.
Okay, I'm going to start modeling now.
We're starting with the Canon 5D Mark IV. I put an 85 millimeter lens on here. Now 85 millimeters is a perfect focal length for shooting portraits. It doesn't really compress the scene. It doesn't really distort anything. It's just a nice focal length to be able to get, kind of a head and shoulders shot of somebody. So that's the focal length we're going to go with through all of these shots.
By the way, the reason we're in the shade is so that there's not a lot of shadowing on us. If we were to turn around and had the sun like hitting me in the face for this, there's all sorts of shadows. So if you're going to take portraits of somebody, try to put them in the shade so that you have a nice flat light. See how there's nothing on either one of us right now? It's sunny behind us and all around us, but we found a little spot of shade to take the shot. And if you can't, that's when you would use some sort of diffuser. Just a little. All right, it's great. Going back to modeling.
It's great when your model can also give you photo advice.
Yeah. Wait, how do I look?
He looks great. It's perfect. You'll see. Remember, you always want to focus on the eyes, especially with shallow depth of field. You want to make sure the eyes are in focus. And I'm going to fire off a few shots. Even though he hasn't moved, lighting conditions haven't changed, he's not changing his expression, always make sure you take a few shots and refocus each time. Because, even though these things are great at focusing, you take one shot, if you're off by even, an inch in focusing, it just doesn't hit it right, you're going to lose the shot. So always refocus and take the same shot a few times. You'll definitely end up getting a nice sharp one. That's perfect. Perfect. So now I've got Bill's Nikon D750 with the Tamron 70 to 200 lens on here. We set it at 85 millimeters at 2.8 just so we're using the same focal length. Hopefully I can shoot this with Bill's back button focusing and get him in nice focus. But I'm going to take the same shots I just took using Bill's camera here. So let's check this out. See Bill's signature move that he's going to go to every time. So these shots should be great.
I've seen models do that. That's what models do, don't they?
So now I'm going to actually switch cameras altogether. I'm going to put the 85 millimeter 1.4 Canon lens onto the Canon M50. Okay, so I got my setup here. I also want to mention that I have the Viltrox speed booster on here, which basically goes between the lens and the camera. It's an adapter so that I can put the full frame size lens on a small mirrorless camera like this. But what the speed booster does is it actually compresses the image onto a smaller space so that I'm still getting advantage of the full frame, the full 85 millimeters, and I don't have to worry about a crop factor, because normally an 85 millimeter lens on a camera like this, it turns into something like a 110 millimeter lens. It's going to change the framing, it's going to change where I stand, it's going to change the depth of field, and I don't want that. I want everything to be the same. So that's why we have that speed booster on here, just to keep everything the same. So I was able to get my settings all set up exactly the way I like, basically by using the touch screen in the back, which is really nice and easy to use. You know, my thumb just finds the place. You know, if I change my ISO, I just hit the ISO square, changed it. I changed my aperture just by hitting the aperture square and change that really quickly. The only other thing I need to do is make sure that I have my focus point correct. Now, focusing on here is actually pretty cool. If you're using the back screen and you just touch anywhere on the screen, it's going to focus there instantly. If you're using the viewfinder, which I find is kind of cool also, what I like to use on my Canon 5D Mark IV, it has a little joystick in the back, and I can use that to focus, you know, to any of the preset focus points on there. This basically, you're doing something similar. It doesn't have the joystick in the back, but I can use my thumb and just move it over the screen in the back, and looking through the viewfinder, it just slides the focus point wherever my thumb happens to be on there. And it's not limited to the preset focus points that the 5D4 have on there. I can basically focus on any point on the screen anywhere and not have to focus and recompose. I can focus on that spot and take the shot right from there.
That to me was huge, because in my D750, the little area of focus is maybe the middle third of the frame that I'm looking through, so I have to focus and then move the camera if I want to put my subject in the corner or off to the side. The fact that you can just quickly touch any point on the screen is fantastic, and you can also set the back screen to actually take the shot when you touch it. So not only can you focus, you can also focus and shoot at the exact same time. So some options there for sure.
There's a little bit of a delay when you do that, when you do the auto shot when you hit the back screen. But you know, that's part of the thing with the mirrorless cameras. Is there is a little bit of a delay focusing, taking the shot that you'll see. But you know, it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have the best of both worlds sometimes. So there's definitely a trade-off there, but it's a cool option.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take some shots of Bill using the Canon M50 with the 85 millimeter lens. Let's see how this works. So the first thing I'm going to make sure that I do is when I look through the viewfinder, I'm going to be moving my thumb around on this back screen here and getting my focus point just where I want it. As soon as I have that, I take the shot. So let's see how this works. Okay, so I got a few more shots there. A little bit of a lag, a little bit of a delay, which I don't love.
So now pull it away from your eye and try it by using the touch screen.
I'll do that.
Let's see if it's any better.
Let's see. All right, so you can see over my shoulder what I'm doing here. I frame the shot, builds it. Now it's automatically searching for a face, which is great. When you're shooting portraits, you know, this thing is constantly trying to focus. It found Bill's face right away, and then I'll just hit the shutter button and see how quickly I can get a shot. So I was able to get a couple of shots pretty quickly there, which was not bad. It actually worked a little bit faster, I found, using the screen in the back.
That's what I found also
compared to looking through the viewfinder. Well, let's take a few more shots using now the budget setup. Okay, so here's the small mirrorless setup. Here's the M50 along with the 50 millimeter lens, and there's even an adapter in there that we had to use, so it's a little bit bigger than it would normally be, but this is how small it is. It's really light.
This is the 5D4 with the 85 millimeter, so it's a big difference. This is a big, heavy setup. It feels good in the hand, but it's big and heavy. This is not something you're going to throw in a bag or, you know, it's not going to be an easy setup to carry around.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages of something like this. Now, everything's a trade-off. You know, you have smaller and lighter. The question is, do you still have the same performance and image quality? You know, even a DSLR is a little bit of a compromise, because, you know, if we were really looking to get the highest, best image quality we possibly could, we'd be using these large format digital cameras. We'd be using these, you know, giant manual, expensive Zeiss manual focus lenses. But, you know, to size and weight and expensive, all of that stuff, you know, it's a compromise to even use professional level DSLR, but the image quality is fantastic. You're not really losing that much. So the question is, you know, with a small lightweight setup like this, are you losing much performance? Are you losing much image quality? So let's see how this works and find out.
Yeah, I've always been of the mind that you can get some really great images and you don't have to have the best gear. You know, good middle of the road gear and a decent photographer will always be better than expensive gear and someone who is not comfortable using it yet. So I think that's more important to become a better photographer than to have the best gear.
Right. I mean, the best camera in the world, I think I've said before, is the camera that you have with you. If you're going to go out, you're going to go out with your family, you're going to just go out for a walk, and you don't want to carry that big camera around with you, then that camera is useless. You don't need it for anything. If this is light and small enough to throw in your pocket everywhere you go and you have it with you, then it's the best camera that you have with you. Even your smartphone, if that's the only camera you have with you, that's the one that's getting your shots in the moment. So it's really whatever camera you have with you is the best that you need. So let's take some shots of Bill using this nice, relatively inexpensive, lightweight setup, and we'll see what we get. Yeah, it focuses nice and fast. It takes a shot fast. Yeah, so far so good. So we're going to put these images into the computer also, and then I'll see you back there, and we can just make some comparisons and see exactly what they look like. But so far it looks pretty good.
All right, so I'm going to bow out of this video now. Eric's going to take you back into the computer at home and give you his thoughts.
It's nice to be back inside. It was pretty cold out there. So let's jump right into Lightroom. I want to compare the shots that I took in the 4 different setups and really dig in and see exactly how they look right out of the camera. Okay, so I imported 1 photo from each setup into Lightroom. So looking at each of these individually, here's the Nikon, here's the Canon 5D4, here's the Canon M50 with the 85mm 1.4 lens, and here's the Canon M50 with the 50mm 1.8 lens. I'll go backwards through those. First glance, they all look basically about exactly the same. The only difference really is in this last image here, the Canon M50 with the 50mm, the depth of field isn't quite as shallow. It has to do with the crop factor and using the full frame lens on the smaller sensor camera. So if you look at these 4 images next to each other, they're pretty much exactly the same. Going in a little bit deeper, looking at sharpness, they're basically all just as sharp as each other. 4 images almost exactly the same as far as the sharpness and the quality of the image. Again, these shots are right out of the camera, no adjustments made, and they really look nice in all 4 situations. If you wanted to take a closer look at some of the shadows here, what the shadows look like if you try to bring them out, this is on Nikon. It looks really nice. It's a little bit noisy, but it's a dark shadow there, so that's not a problem. Shooting over to the Canon, it's probably going to look exactly the same. It looks basically exactly the same. The M50 with the 85mm lens basically looks the same in the shadows. The M50 with the 50mm lens looks the same. Again, you can see that it's a little bit sharper here because the depth of field is a little bit deeper. So I got to tell you, right out of the gate, right out of the camera, you can't tell the difference between these 4 images. I'll line them up side by side here. If you want to take a screenshot, you can do that. You can print it out and you can have a nice 4-bill panorama hanging on your wall. That's my gift to you. Like I said, you may be able to nitpick some difference out of here, but on first glance and looking a little bit deeper into these, you basically can't tell the difference between these 4 shots. So, some pretty interesting results. Let's go back out into the field for one final word, and then we'll finish up.
This is a good little setup if you're just getting going. I imagine this would be a great way to get started with digital photography and mirrorless setups and just cameras. And also just portraiture is not just, having someone pose for you. This is what, like when we're in the Disney park, so we're out with our kids, this is like the kind of setup you want. You want something where you can blur the background and get a really nice image of your family, and because that's what most of us are taking pictures of. It's not always, 99% of us are not getting paid to take pictures of people. We're just out capturing our families and our friends in everyday situations. So that's what this is about.
Well, there you have it. If you like that video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions about this or anything that we're doing here on the channel, please put them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Definitely subscribe and click on that little notification bell. This way you get notified every time I post a video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.